Imagine a man whose big idea was so stupid that the local newspaper printed it as a joke. His plan was simple: cut ice from a frozen pond, load it onto a slow wooden ship, and sail it into the hottest places on Earth. He wanted to sell frozen water to people who'd never seen it, and he'd sell it in countries where it melted long before he could unload it. Every merchant in Boston agreed on one thing: this man was a fool. So the city laughed and waited for him to go broke. And he did. The ice melted, the money vanished, and soon he lost his freedom too. Then he did it again and again for 27 years, until that same joke was shipping ice all the way to India, and its owner was dying one of the richest men of his age. So which was he? A stubborn fool the world got tired of laughing at? Or a man who saw a fortune nobody else could? His name was Frederic Tudor. To understand the joke, you have to see where it started. And Frederic Tudor did not start poor. He was born in Boston in 1783. Into one of the grandest families in the city. His father was a wealthy lawyer who'd once given legal advice to George Washington himself. The Tudors had money, land, and a name that opened every door in New England. Frederic was supposed to become a proper gentleman. Instead, he turned down college and went hunting for a fortune of his own. Then a trip to the Caribbean as a young man changed how he saw the world. On that trip, one strange idea lodged in his head and never once left. The heat down there was brutal, and there was no escape from it. No cold drinks, no cold food, nothing to keep meat or fish from spoiling. Back home, Massachusetts alone held more than 3,000 ponds that froze hard every winter. Each one turned into a solid sheet of ice, thick enough to walk on, and that ice cost nothing, because it just sat there melting every spring. So Frederic asked a question that sounded insane to everyone who heard it. What if you could carry the winter all the way to the tropics? In February of 1806, he decided to find out. He bought a small ship called the Favorite. He had to, since no captain in Boston would touch the cargo into its hold. Went roughly 80 tons of ice, cut from a frozen family pond. Then he aimed it at Martinique, a tropical island where ice had never existed. Boston thought this was the funniest thing it had heard in years. The Boston Gazette ran the story like a punchline. No joke, it wrote. A ship had cleared the harbor carrying a cargo of ice. They added that they hoped it would not prove a slippery speculation. As the story goes, barely any. Crew even wanted the job. Some sailors feared the melting ice would flood the hold and drag them all under. Now, a lucky fool can win once. So look hard at what came next. He lost. Much of the ice melted on the long voyage south. The islanders had never handled ice and had no clue how to keep the rest from turning to water. One buyer left a block sitting in the noon sun, then complained that it had melted to nothing. There was one bright spot. Frederic used some of the ice to make ice cream and cleared $300 in a single night. But it wasn't nearly enough. He sold what he could and sailed home with less than he'd started with. The verdict looked settled. The fool had proven he was a fool. This is the part that makes no sense. He did it again. He sent a second load south toward Cuba and lost money all over again. Then the timing turned cruel. Thomas Jefferson's trade embargo of 1807 shut down American shipping almost overnight. Right after that, war with Britain slammed the ports shut. His debts swelled until they swallowed him whole. Sheriffs chased him through Boston to collect what he owed, and Frederic Tudor, son of a great Boston family, was thrown into debtor's prison. Picture how that looked to the city. The rich man's boy, locked in a cell, ruined over frozen water. And here the whole equation shifted, because in and out of that prison, he kept attacking the one problem everyone ignored. How do you stop ice from melting across a 4-week voyage? Everyone assumed you couldn't, so nobody bothered to try. He tested straw, he tested hay, then he found his answer in a pile of factory waste, sawdust. The sawmills threw it out for free and packed around the blocks. It barely let them melt. Now the impossible cargo could survive the journey. He designed double-walled ice houses that trapped the cold and let the meltwater drain away. He spotted another edge too. Ships often left Boston half empty, sailing south just to pick up fruit and sugar. Filling those bare holds with his ice got him dirt-cheap freight nobody else wanted. Next, he built ice houses in the tropical ports to store what arrived, and he taught people who'd never felt cold to crave it. He ordered his agents to hand the very first ice away for nothing. Let one man drink his drinks cold for a week, he said, and he'll never take them warm again. In 1810, he locked down a 6-year monopoly on ice in Havana and turned his first real profit. For years, the work still crawled, because cutting ice by hand was backbreaking. Then, a supplier named Nathaniel Wyeth built a horse-drawn iron cutter that carved the ponds into clean, even blocks. His output more than tripled almost at once. The ice now came faster, cheaper, and squarer than any hand could manage. Cold drinks that had never existed grew fashionable wherever his ice arrived. The trade even reached London, where New England ice turned into a fashionable luxury. It grew so prized that Queen Victoria's own household took it at the royal table. And then Tudor reached for the trade that should have been impossible. In 1833, He agreed to ship ice not to the Caribbean, but to Calcutta, in India. Look hard at what that meant. 16,000 miles of open ocean, 4 full months at sea. A route that crossed the equator, straight through the hottest water on the planet. On May the 12th, a ship called the Tuscany left Boston, carrying 180 tons of New England ice. When it neared the Ganges, many locals were certain the whole thing had to be an elaborate hoax. Ice from the far side of the world, arriving whole in the Indian heat. But the hold still held about 100 tons. Clear and solid people there called those blocks crystal blocks of Yankee coldness. The city was so grateful it sent Boston's ice a thank you gift. Word of the miracle spread fast, and soon Bombay and Madras were begging for shipments of their own. Over the next 20 years, Calcutta alone would earn him around $220,000. He built ice houses to hold it all, from Havana and New Orleans to Madras, Bombay, and Singapore. The frozen ponds of Massachusetts were now chilling drinks on the banks of the Ganges. Sit with the full weight of that pattern for a moment. Martinique, Cuba, the sawdust, the ice houses, the machine, London, and finally India. The man Boston jailed for shipping frozen water now sold that same water across 2 hemispheres. By the middle of the century, ships left Boston with ice bound for 43 different countries. Some claimed American ice had become one of the nation's greatest exports, second only to cotton. The joke had turned into an empire. So what do we call this man? A fool who got lucky? Or the one sane mind in a whole city full of skeptics? Before you pick a side, look at both, because both are strong. First, the case that Boston was right about him. For almost 30 years, this idea did nothing but wreck him. His first voyage lost money, and so did the next 3 straight after it. His own brother quit the business and walked away for good. That brother thrived elsewhere, helping found a respected review and a famous library. His father poured money in and lost that too. Frederic went bankrupt and sat in a debtor's cell over melting water. There was no hidden cleverness at work here. He was a man refusing to read the obvious result in front of him. And even after the ice finally paid, he couldn't stop gambling. He bet a fortune on coffee prices, using his ice business as the collateral. Then he crashed $250,000 into debt in a single stretch. For most of his life, the sensible people of Boston were proven right. He filled private journals with schemes and grudges. Sure, the whole world had misjudged him, and still he kept losing everything over and over on frozen water. But now the story turns, and it turns hard. Look again at what those same ruinous years actually built. The idea only looked insane because he was the first person alive to see it. No ice trade existed at all before Frederic Tudor. There was no market to win. He built one out of nothing. The sawdust, the ice houses, the free samples, the cutting machine. None of it was luck. Each piece was a problem he cracked, because he would not quit. He once wrote that a man who quits at the first blow was never a hero, and never would be. The men who laughed at him risked nothing and built nothing. He risked everything, and built an industry that kept the world cold for 90 more years. By 1880, America was cutting millions of tons of ice from its ponds each winter. The ice he moved changed how people ate, how they drank, and how doctors cooled the sick. It grew so dominant that rival exporters in Norway renamed one of their own lakes Wenham, just to borrow New England's shine. When he died in 1864, the city that had jailed him called him the Ice King. By some accounts, his fortune would be worth around $200 million today. The writer Henry David Thoreau watched Tudor's crews carve up his own Walden Pond. He wrote that the pure water of Walden was now mixing with the sacred water of the Ganges. Maybe that's genius. Or maybe it's just what pure stubbornness looks like on the rare day it finally wins. And that's the question this whole story leaves sitting in your lap. We only call an idea visionary after it works. Before that, it looks exactly like foolishness. The visionary and the fool stand in the very same room. They make the same crazy argument to the very same laughing crowd. The only real difference is who's still standing at the end. Frederic Tudor lost the ice, lost the money, and lost his freedom. And he refused to leave that room for 27 years. So was he a genius who saw the future coming, or a stubborn man that luck got tired of punishing? Somewhere, out on a frozen pond, a man is cutting the winter into blocks. He's getting ready to sell it to the sun, and a whole city stands around him, laughing.